Victory was only the beginning of the story America chose to tell. In the aftermath of 1945, a new narrative emerged, one built on triumph, righteousness, and moral clarity. But behind the familiar images of liberation and unity, declassified records reveal a nation carefully editing its own reflection. Let's uncover the 10 myths the United States built to protect its World War II legacy. 1. The United States entered the war solely to defend freedom. Most Americans grew up believing that the nation's entry into World War II was a moral crusade, a response to tyranny, genocide, and unprovoked aggression. The narrative emphasizes Pearl Harbor as the moment America rose selflessly to defend democracy. While the attack was indeed unprovoked, the deeper record of pre-war planning and policy reveals that the decision to enter the conflict was also shaped by strategic, economic, and geopolitical calculation. This myth took root during the war itself, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration framed U.S. involvement as a defense of civilization. Office of War Information films, such as Why We Fight, 1942-45, presented the conflict as a battle between freedom and oppression. After 1945, that portrayal hardened into national memory, reinforced by school curricula and Hollywood narratives that simplified the complex diplomacy of the late 1930s. The image of reluctant but righteous intervention became central to the post-war identity of the United States as leader of the free world. Archival records tell a broader story. Roosevelt's correspondence and the Lend-Lease program of 1941 showed that the U.S. had already committed its industrial base to the Allied cause months before Pearl Harbor. Navy patrols were escorting British convoys in the Atlantic under the pretext of neutrality, and by September 1941, American destroyers were already exchanging fire with German U-boats. Economic historians such as Alan Milward and Charles Kindleberger have documented how securing trade routes, maintaining access to global markets, and containing Japanese expansion in the Pacific were seen as vital national interests. The moral dimension of intervention grew in tandem with these objectives, but did not replace them. Recognizing this does not diminish the sacrifices that followed. Rather, it restores balance to the narrative. The United States entered the war to defend its security, its economy, and, yes, its ideals, but in that order. This understanding reframes the war not as spontaneous altruism, but as a deliberate assertion of global leadership that shaped the century to come. 2. American bombing campaigns were precise and humanitarian. The official story of the U.S. air war portrays it as a campaign of precision, industrial targets struck with surgical accuracy to minimize civilian harm. Wartime films and post-war textbooks often present American bombing as technologically advanced and morally restrained, especially when contrasted with the indiscriminate attacks conducted by Germany or Japan. Yet military records and bombing analyses reveal a far different reality. This narrative emerged from the U.S. Army Air Force's own doctrine, known as precision daylight bombing. The 8th Air Force in Europe and the 20th in the Pacific promoted the idea that advanced Norden bomb sites allowed crews to hit factories, rail yards, and oil depots with accuracy within a few hundred feet. The claim served both operational morale and post-war justification, distinguishing American strategy from British night bombing, which openly targeted cities. After 1945, this distinction became central to the American self-image of a moral war machine. Declassified operational data contradicts that portrayal. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey reports from 1946 show that, under real combat conditions, fewer than 20% of bombs fell within 1,000 feet of their targets. In raids such as the attack on Schweinfurt in October 1943 or Dresden in February 1945, industrial zones were often missed, while civilian neighborhoods suffered catastrophic losses. The Pacific Campaign was even less precise. General Curtis LeMay's firebombing of Tokyo on March 9–10, 1945, destroyed over 15 square miles of the city, killing an estimated 100,000 people, surpassing the immediate death toll of either atomic bomb. Historians like Richard Overy and Mark Clodfelter note that the emphasis on precision was rhetorical, not statistical. The reality was total war. Air power designed to break national capacity, regardless of cost. By 1944, US bombing mirrored British area bombing in all but name. The persistence of this myth reflects post-war America's need to define its violence as moral necessity. Recognizing the gap between doctrine and outcome challenges the comforting notion of clean warfare and forces a more honest reckoning with the industrial nature of victory. 3. The atomic bombs ended the war and saved millions of lives. For generations, Americans were taught that the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki forced Japan's surrender and spared countless lives that would have been lost in an invasion. This explanation, widely accepted since 1945, framed the bomb as both tragic and necessary, a decisive act that ended the war swiftly. However, diplomatic archives and Japanese records suggest that Japan's collapse was already imminent before August 1945. The narrative of necessity originated in President Truman's August 6, 1945, address announcing the Hiroshima bombing. His statement claimed the weapon prevented 500,000 American casualties. That number was never based on formal military estimates. Post-war analyses by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey concluded that Japan would likely have surrendered before November 1945 due to conventional bombing and the Soviet Union's entry into the war. The Soviet declaration of war on Japan on August 8 was arguably the decisive shock to Tokyo's leadership, ending hopes of mediation through Moscow. Japanese cabinet minutes from August 9 reveal that news of the Soviet invasion of Manchuria, not Nagasaki's destruction, triggered the first unanimous discussion of surrender. Historians like Tsuyoshi Hasegawa and Gar Alperovitz have shown that the U.S. insistence on unconditional surrender delayed diplomatic openings that might have ended the war weeks earlier. Truman's decision also had post-war dimensions, signaling American power to the Soviet Union at the dawn of the Cold War. The atomic bombings caused approximately 200,000 deaths, the majority civilian. They demonstrated an unmatched capacity for destruction, but were not the sole factor in ending the conflict. The persistence of the myth simplifies a complex intersection of military exhaustion, Soviet intervention, and diplomatic miscalculation. Understanding this context reframes the event not as an unavoidable end, but as a choice rooted in emerging geopolitics, a bridge between one war and the tensions of the next. 4. The United States liberated the world alone. American memory often centers on the image of solitary triumph, the belief that U.S. forces single-handedly liberated Europe and the Pacific from fascism. Textbooks and wartime newsreels celebrated the American soldier as the decisive force, overshadowing the vast contributions of Allied partners. The truth, recorded in casualty lists and production figures, reveals a global coalition in which the United States played a critical but not solitary role. This perception grew from wartime propaganda. Hollywood films like The Story of G.I. Joe, 1945, and Sands of Iwo Jima, 1949, reinforced national pride by focusing on American heroism. During the early Cold War, this narrative expanded as political necessity demanded a clear distinction between Western and Soviet contributions. The Soviet Union's sacrifices, more than 20 million dead, and the destruction of over 70% of German forces on the Eastern Front were minimized or omitted in U.S. discourse. Archival data from the combined Chiefs of Staff and post-war Allied assessments confirm that by June 1944, the Red Army engaged 190 of Germany's 270 active divisions. In contrast, U.S. and British forces faced roughly 60 divisions during the Normandy campaign. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad in February 1943 and the subsequent offensive at Kursk decisively weakened the Wehrmacht long before D-Day. Meanwhile, Chinese forces tied down over 500,000 Japanese troops throughout the Pacific War, significantly easing American operations. The Marshall Plan and American post-war reconstruction further reinforced the myth of sole savior. By funding Europe's recovery, the U.S. cemented its image as both liberator and benefactor, while wartime cooperation gave way to ideological rivalry. Yet history shows that World War II's outcome was collective. a convergence of resources, geography, and endurance shared among nations. Acknowledging that complexity does not diminish American valor, it honors the scale of shared sacrifice. The liberation of Europe and Asia was not the act of one nation, but of many. Seeing it as such restores historical proportion to a story long narrowed by victory's glow. 5. The American home front was united and sacrificial. The enduring image of the wartime United States is one of unity. Citizens rationing, women working in factories, and communities standing as one behind the troops. While these scenes were real, they formed part of a broader narrative managed by government messaging that concealed divisions, labor unrest, and systemic inequality. The home front, far from universally harmonious, was marked by tension, discrimination, and dissent. This myth emerged through wartime mobilization campaigns. The Office of War Information and private media portrayed America as a single-purpose society. Posters declared, "We're all in this together," while newsreels celebrated workers exceeding production quotas. Yet FBI files, labor reports, and local newspapers tell a different story. Between 1942 and 1945, over 14,000 labor strikes occurred, involving nearly 7 million workers. Many protested poor wages, long hours, and unsafe conditions despite official pleas for no-strike patriotism. Racial tensions also erupted beneath the surface of unity. In June 1943, the Detroit race riot left 34 dead after clashes between white and black defense workers. Japanese Americans, over 120,000 of them, were forcibly relocated to internment camps under Executive Order 9066, a policy upheld by the Supreme Court in Korematsu v. United States, 1944. Mexican-American youths faced discrimination culminating in the Los Angeles Zoot Suit riots, while segregation remained intact in both the armed forces and war industries. Government propaganda deliberately minimized these divisions. Newsreel censorship and photographic restrictions prevented images of domestic unrest from reaching the public. Meanwhile, corporate leaders used patriotic imagery to suppress labor organization. Records from the War Production Board reveal how industrial strikes were often reclassified as local disruptions to preserve the illusion of cohesion. The myth of unity served its purpose. It sustained morale and justified unprecedented federal control over the economy. But the archival truth shows a nation both mobilized and conflicted, patriotic yet divided, prosperous yet unequal. Recognizing this complexity restores realism to the image of wartime America and prepares us to see the next myths not as betrayals of unity, but as products of how that unity was manufactured. 6. The American soldier was always the best equipped on the battlefield. The popular image of the U.S. soldier in World War II is one of unmatched superiority, equipped with advanced weapons, abundant supplies, and state-of-the-art technology. In documentaries and wartime propaganda, the GI appears as a symbol of modern warfare, representing the triumph of American industry over scarcity. Yet wartime logistics reports and after-action reviews reveal a more uneven reality. Many U.S. units entered combat with inadequate gear, unreliable weapons, and persistent shortages that undercut this enduring image of limitless supply. This belief emerged during and after the war through official photography, Hollywood productions, and morale campaigns. Films such as The Fighting Sullivans, 1944, and 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, 1944, presented soldiers as fully equipped professionals supported by a flawless supply chain. The Office of War Information curated these images to showcase industrial might. After 1945, this visual narrative evolved into a national symbol of technological dominance, overshadowing the logistical chaos of the early war years. Operational records from North Africa, Italy, and the Pacific contradict this image. In 1942, U.S. infantry divisions arriving in Tunisia were issued outdated World War I rifles and inadequate anti-tank weapons. Quartermaster General reports confirm that troops in the Aleutian Campaign lacked winter clothing for months, resulting in frostbite cases that rivaled combat losses. In the Pacific, jungle humidity rendered M1 Garand rifles and Thompson submachine guns prone to malfunction, while rations spoiled in tropical conditions. Even the celebrated Sherman tank, the mainstay of U.S. armored forces, was outgunned by German Panzer V's and Panthers until late 1944. Its reliability and quantity compensated for its weaknesses, but not without heavy cost. Archival evidence shows that it wasn't superior equipment, but adaptive logistics that sustained American armies. The establishment of the Red Ball Express in France, the Seabees' rapid construction of Pacific airfields, and continuous field innovation kept units operational. The myth of perfect equipment, though comforting, erases the improvisation and sacrifice required to overcome material limits. Recognizing this restores the soldier's humanity. Victory depended less on industrial perfection than on endurance amid imperfection. 7. The U.S. Navy won the Pacific War alone. For many Americans, the Pacific War narrative centers on carrier battles, island invasions, and the inexorable advance of the U.S. Navy toward Japan. The story often portrays the Sea War as a distinctly American triumph. Midway, Leyte Gulf, and Okinawa serving as milestones of naval mastery. But the archives of Allied operations and post-war naval assessments reveal that the Pacific victory was a coalition effort shaped by contributions far beyond American command. This perception took hold through wartime media and post-war commemoration. The Navy's Bureau of Public Relations heavily promoted its independent victories to secure funding and public prestige. Hollywood productions like Midway and They Were Expendable later reinforced the image of American self-reliance. During the early Cold War, the simplification of the Pacific narrative also served a strategic purpose, highlighting U.S. naval dominance as a deterrent to the Soviet Union. Operational records from 1942 to 1945 show the depth of Allied participation. Australian and New Zealand forces provided key bases and air cover throughout the South Pacific, while British and Dutch ships participated in the Burma and Indian Ocean campaigns. Chinese troops tied down Japanese divisions across mainland Asia, diverting pressure from U.S. operations. The Royal Navy's Pacific Fleet, established in 1945, conducted joint raids on the Japanese home islands alongside the U.S. Third Fleet. Even the logistical infrastructure, fuel depots, repair yards, and airstrips, was a cooperative endeavor coordinated through the Southwest Pacific Command. Admiral Ernest King's wartime correspondence reveals frustration with inter-allied coordination, yet it also confirms dependence on these networks. The scale of the Pacific theater required a global logistics system that no single nation could sustain. Historian John Dower notes that Japan's defeat stemmed from cumulative attrition, economic blockade, submarine warfare, and air raids, executed through interlocking Allied resources. Acknowledging this reality does not diminish the U.S. Navy's achievements. It places them in context, as part of a multinational structure that made victory possible. The myth of solitary triumph obscures the shared endurance that bridged vast oceans and divided commands in pursuit of a single objective. 8. World War II created an era of lasting global peace. After 1945, Americans were told that the war to end tyranny had secured a lasting peace, a moral and political order guaranteed by the victory of democracy. The founding of the United Nations and the occupation of Axis territories seemed to confirm that ideal. Yet declassified diplomatic cables, intelligence files, and post-war military reports show that the conclusion of World War II marked not peace, but the reorganization of global conflict. This myth arose from the rhetoric of victory. President Truman's addresses in 1945 promised a world free from fear and aggression. The image of American soldiers returning home to prosperity reinforced the idea that total war had yielded permanent stability. Early post-war textbooks echoed this optimism, describing the United States as the architect of a peaceful new world. But the rapid onset of the Cold War, the Korean conflict, and nuclear rearmament revealed that peace was conditional and transient. The continuity of wartime mobilization into peacetime is well documented. The 1947 National Security Act established the Department of Defense and the CIA, institutionalizing a permanent military infrastructure. Declassified memoranda from the State Department's policy planning staff show that by 1946, officials already viewed Soviet expansion as a military threat requiring sustained readiness. Economic programs like the Marshall Plan, while humanitarian in effect, also functioned as strategic containment. The atomic monopoly held by the US until 1949 accelerated rather than ended global militarization. Historians such as Melvin Leffler and Odd Arne Westad have shown that the post-war order was less a break from conflict than a transformation of it, from conventional warfare to ideological confrontation. The global peace that followed was one enforced by deterrence and proxy wars, extending the logic of 1939-45 into the second half of the century. To view 1945 as a dawn of peace is to misunderstand its legacy. It was not the end of conflict, but the beginning of its management on a global scale, a continuation of total war by political means. 9. American war crimes were isolated or exaggerated. The moral clarity of the Allied victory often rests on the assumption that American forces fought with exceptional restraint. The official record and much of popular history frame U.S. conduct as fundamentally humane, in contrast to Axis brutality. Yet military court documents, eyewitness reports, and post-war investigations reveal that American violations of wartime law, though far smaller in scale, were not isolated anomalies. This belief stemmed from wartime censorship and selective reporting. The U.S. government tightly controlled photographs and news dispatches under the Office of Censorship, forbidding images of civilian casualties caused by American firepower. Journalists embedded with combat units operated under strict guidelines that prohibited reference to misconduct. After the war, the Nuremberg and Tokyo trials further shaped perception by defining justice as a process imposed by victors, not applied equally. Declassified U.S. Army records document cases that challenge the myth of moral perfection. In Sicily, July 1943, troops of the 45th Infantry Division executed German prisoners during the Biscari incident, identified in official inquiry papers as reprisal killings. General George Patton's diary and military police reports confirmed that similar acts occurred sporadically across Italy and France. In the Pacific, captured Japanese testimonies and U.S. Marine reports describe the killing of surrendering soldiers and the desecration of remains. While courts-martial were held, most sentences were commuted or unrecorded. Civilian casualties from strategic bombing further blur moral boundaries. The U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey estimated that American operations in Europe and Japan caused over 300,000 civilian deaths. Though justified as military necessity, these actions reflected a total war doctrine that left little room for moral distinction. Recognizing this does not equate American conduct with Axis atrocities, but it demands intellectual honesty. The belief in exceptional virtue oversimplifies the moral terrain of global conflict. Historical integrity requires acknowledging that justice, like victory, was unevenly applied. 10. America's memory of the war has always been honest. The final and most enduring myth is the belief that the United States has faced its wartime past with full transparency. Popular culture suggests a nation unafraid to confront its history through museums, films, and public commemoration. Yet the archival record reveals decades of selective disclosure, narrative management, and political filtration designed to preserve a unifying version of the good war. This process began immediately after 1945. The U.S. government's control over declassification shaped what the public could know. The Office of Strategic Services, precursor to the CIA, destroyed large portions of its wartime files before dissolution in 1946. Cold War priorities then guided what information was released. The atrocities of allies, such as the Soviet massacre at Katyn or the British suppression of colonial revolts, were minimized to maintain unity against communism. Domestically, sensitive subjects like the internment of Japanese Americans or the racial inequities of the draft remained underexplored until the 1970s. The entertainment industry reinforced sanitized memory. War films of the 1950s and 1960s, produced with Defense Department cooperation, emphasized heroism and virtue. Only later works, like The Best Years of Our Lives or The Thin Red Line, began to hint at moral ambiguity. Meanwhile, veterans' testimony, though extensive, was curated by public institutions to align with patriotic narratives. The 1995 Smithsonian controversy over the Enola Gay exhibit demonstrated the persistence of this control. When curators attempted to present the atomic bombings within full historical context, public and political pressure forced revisions. Historians now agree that collective memory of World War II was built as much by omission as by record. The myth of complete honesty served national cohesion during an age of ideological conflict. Yet the gradual release of classified material, from intelligence operations to racial policies, shows that America's remembrance has evolved through selective revelation. The war's legacy endures not in its myths of perfection, but in its capacity for re-examination. Each disclosure, each declassified file, brings the narrative closer to truth, reminding us that even the most celebrated victory remains a history still under construction. History rarely tells everything, but what it leaves behind still defines how nations remember themselves. Every document, every omission, reveals not only what was done, but what was chosen to be forgotten. The legacy of World War II remains unfinished, preserved in archives, questioned in memory, and reshaped with each generation that looks back. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe and keep history alive.